CFB Paint Week 12 is in the books, and kind of a mixed bag this week. I feel like, um, I don't know, my takeaways were there were two or three really surprising games, and the rest of it kind of went the way we thought it would. Maybe not to the degree, maybe they weren't quite like crazy blowouts, but I don't know, kind of a mixed bag. And I feel like we're kind of in for another sleepy week this next week, but we'll see. Outside of one or two, pretty premier matchups. But let's break down the week that was. Corey, your big takeaways.
Um, Everybody's gettable. I mean, Oregon only is able to score 16 points against Wisconsin. Wisconsin goes and fires Phil Longo right after that game, the offensive coordinator. They haven't scored more than 20 points since since October 26th or 19th or something like that. So they've done some struggles. BYU goes down. They've scored less and less points over the last 4 or 5 games. Their offense is not clicking. Texas, I don't feel like the game was ever in doubt with Arkansas, but they couldn't put them away. And then Tennessee, Georgia, that game, 31-17 was much closer than the score shows. With Georgia able to put away at the end, but not quite able to exact dominance. People are like touting Carson Beck and his play in the second half or whatever. I'm like, yeah, he did much better throwing the ball deep than he had previously in the last 3 weeks. But yeah, I'm not buying this Georgia team quite yet, and so yeah.
Nice. Yeah, maybe we start with that game. I don't know. Like I just I mean I only saw like bits and pieces of that game. I yeah, I'm right there with you. Like I feel like Georgia, like it really depends on which Georgia shows up, and
Which
even
Carson Beck
within,
showed up,
well,
essentially.
that's true too. Um, yeah, that's a good point because again the ground game hasn't been great, and so I feel like that's kind of been a theme for what the last 3 or 4 years at Georgia. I remember like when Kirby Smart first really got it rolling there, they had a stable of backs. I'm thinking, DeAndre Swift. Um, oh goodness, now I'm going to blank names right as I try and do it. DeAndre Swift, Sony Michel was I think there when he was first getting started, if memory serves. But that might be.
Yeah, and then
I think he was kind of in the transition.
you have the
Um,
cook kid over at the Bills now.
James Cook, Elijah Holyfield. They had a lot, and
Gurley
lately
wasn't
they've
in that
even had
section, was he?
Todd Gurley, I think, was mostly Mark Richt, and maybe
Okay.
even only Mark Richt, but
Yeah, I
but
don't
maybe
remember.
maybe he was there for that sort of that transition between those two. But I mean, lately, like you think of like Zamir White, Zeus, like came in with all the billing you could ever expect. Didn't really
Struggles.
do a whole lot, yeah. Um, and they've had that I think with a few backs now in a row, and I think that they're a little bit more banged up this year than they've been in years past. But yeah, the ground game from Georgia, something we've come to expect. I think in the last 3 years or so, last two for certain, has kind of taken a bit of a step back. Tennessee, not a very good offensive football team. Like I'll just kind of come out and say, outside of Dylan Sampson, he's really good. Um, uh, yeah. So I don't know if I had any like major takeaways. It kind of played out the way I thought it would, more or less. Like competitive game again. Yeah, like you said, it wasn't like a 14-point victory kind of suggests at least a level of control in that game, and it just I didn't feel like that was necessarily the case. But um, Georgia did what they had to do. They win. They stay in the hunt for an SEC championship, and um, yeah, that one's
Yeah,
one
I
that
mean,
will. Oh, go ahead.
no, I agree. Like, it's tied 17-17 at halftime, and up until 2.5 minutes left, Georgia can't slam the door shut. I mean, they do have that march of a drive down. It's 12 plays, 92 yards, and they score 2.5 minutes left. But other than that, like, if you couldn't slam the door shut, you kept leaving it open. I mean, if Tennessee had done anything in their previous plays and made it this close, it would have been interesting to see. But yeah, I don't know. Georgia had to win this one. Carson Beck was a much more effective in his deep ball than he has been in the last 2-3 games. But can you bank on it? Well, we saw him be effective on that deep ball against Alabama, and maybe even some against Texas. But Yeah, the last two games before this one, you hadn't seen that. So which Carson Beck are you going to get, and is he going to be rattled? The one thing that they managed to do is they didn't get like I don't think Tennessee pressured him or got pressure on him very much. I don't know what the stats are off of that off the top of my head, but it didn't feel like he got a ton of pressure. He got a ton of heat. So yeah, I'm pulling buffs.
Yeah, I've heard others kind of mention that, and again, I didn't see the entire. I didn't watch that game start to finish.
Yeah, zero
But
sacks, two tackles for a loss. So like not in the backfield, not the O line controlled that game. Seems like pretty well. So if you can manage that, great. But once you get into playoff ball, I can't imagine you always holding up that often. You know. So
yeah, I can think of some pass rushers on Oregon, on Ohio State,
Miami.
um, potentially, yeah, Miami, perhaps, maybe even Texas if they get another crack at them. That might give you some problems, right? Um, so, yeah, that's something to keep an eye on going forward. Is Tennessee out? Like they're
Oh, you have two losses. What are your losses to Georgia
in
and
Arkansas.
Arkansas? I don't know where their standings are. I mean, I feel like you're kind of
I
on the
think they're
outs. You're
still
playing.
tied for first place, right? Like everyone's, or maybe tied for second right now. I think Texas only has the one SEC loss, but everyone else has at least two
Yeah,
SEC losses, if memory serves.
maybe A&M might be okay. Or did A&M get beat? Yeah, A&M's only got one loss too.
Oh, okay, that's right. They lost to I don't know. I had in my head that they already had two conference losses. They lost to Notre Dame, and they also lost to South Carolina, right?
This Georgia game, or sorry, so you got Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, all at two losses, and who gets in? I don't know. Like if BYU beats Colorado, does that put Colorado at three losses then
Yeah,
in the SEC, in the championship? I think that either way, the Big 12 only gets one team in.
probably,
Yeah, the ACC probably only gets one team in. I mean,
probably again.
like maybe if like SMU and Miami play a good game and they're close.
Yeah, I guess now that I'm thinking about it, like within the playoff rankings, I can't remember exactly what the ranks are, but I want to say they're 11 and 14, something
Off the
like
top of
that.
my head, I don't know.
Something like that. They're both kind of in the double digits, right? They're not ranked in the single digits, and I don't think any win for either of them up to the point of that championship game is really going to move the needle.
No, but people dropping potentially might.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
looking
that's
at
a
it real
good
quick.
point.
SMU is 14 and Miami's 9. I was at the one below.
Gotcha. So yeah, I like okay. So yeah, it's probably a one bid league. I suppose there's probably a scenario where if Miami wins out, if I guess if they both win out and SMU wins a close game, you could potentially both sneak in.
Yeah, I think what you're gonna have is like Tennessee, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Bama. Those four are all vying to get in. They're like according to the rankings that are last week, right? They get released on Tuesday of this next week.
Mm-hmm.
You have Tennessee at 7, they lost. Miami at 9, Alabama at 10, Ole Miss at 11, Georgia at 12. So like looking at Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. Okay, Tennessee and Georgia played a close game. Georgia pulls out the win. You probably drop them below Georgia, below Ole Miss, below Alabama, but do you put them above Boise State or not? So they end up in that 13, 12 to 14 range, and they might be on the outs because if Boise State doesn't make it in to that 12 to 13 range or whatever, that top 12, then they're going to kick the number 12 team out. And if heaven forbid, actually, most likely, you're probably only going to get 11 teams, the top 11 teams, or the top 10 teams in potentially because I can't see the Big 12 team, even
Yeah, it will be ranked below there, and so will the Group of Five champ,
yeah.
like most likely.
So yeah, which one misses? Tennessee, Ole Miss. I think you're gonna have two of them that miss if as long as Notre Dame and Miami take care of business. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I
and then
would.
Indiana. Oh, we'll see what happens with Indiana against Ohio State, and if they get beaten, all of a sudden the respect drops off their name, because I think that's what happened with BYU with the AP poll. They got beat once and the respect dropped completely off the name.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Again, I think there's a chance for BYU to actually earn back a bit of that this weekend, but because I expect Arizona State to get some respect in that CFB
They've been
poll.
impressive.
Yeah, they
They
played
played the
awesome.
last
Um,
really, really well. So
we can start off talking about that one again. I only got brief eyes on that, but part of it was because it was like, all right, it's already 24-0.
yeah,
and that stadium was dead. And it was like, all right, they just went on the road and took care of business. And they, it didn't appear that they did a whole lot in the second half. 0 points in the second half, but they also didn't give up a whole lot in the second half either. So,
yeah.
and they
I
now,
mean,
according to Dennis Dodd, they control their own destiny now. If they win out, I'm
yeah.
assuming. Well, the one thing I hadn't worked out was the tiebreaker between them and Iowa State.
Let's
But
see.
so I'm assuming someone's done that. And again, Dennis Dodd is a journalist, so holding him to kind of a higher standard than uh, two part-time podcasters, I feel pretty comfortable saying he
No, so
probably did the
you beat
homework.
BYU. You hold the head-to-head over BYU, and then I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about
They
one
do,
again.
they don't play Colorado. They don't play Iowa State. Iowa State would both be at that same.
Yeah,
If they keep winning out, they'd both be at that 7-2 record for the conference in the conference, and presumably they win on tiebreakers again, according to Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports. But either way,
throw him under the bus.
yeah, I will. I mean, he put his name on it. He tweeted it out.
Yeah.
So uh, I I just think that the Big 12 got a little bit more interesting. I mean, it was already interesting. Um, I think Colorado looks like the class of the conference at this point. Like that was a pretty
I
impressive
100%
win
agree with
versus
that.
Utah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that one kind of played out the way we described it. I actually re-listened to us talking about that game, and I kind of said, "Look, I think Utah can keep it close, but it's either a nail biter or they're going to lose by 20." And sure enough, like they just didn't have enough. The explosiveness of Colorado's athletes, I think, is a problem for lots of teams in the conference, and like they're playing really good defense lately. Like I'm very impressed with what Colorado has been able to do on the defensive side of the ball. Particularly, the defensive line is pretty formidable, and some of it's like maybe we could have projected it with um, Sam Okunlola, like he was a productive player at Pitt, right? Like he did things there. I'm just it's I think finally starting to um, come into focus along that entire defensive front. But um, yeah, I think Colorado now plays. Oh gosh, I just blanked on it. Um,
Kansas.
they yeah, Kansas. They're running into the Giant Slayers right now, and they're on the road. Granted,
Kansas
it's
State beat
Kansas isn't playing
BYU.
at home, but yeah, they've
It is at
Kansas.
Kansas.
If they if,
I think it is at Kansas, right?
Well, it is, but it's at Arrowhead Stadium. It's not there. Like it's not in Lawrence. I think that their stadium is being renovated or built, so they haven't played any games on campus.
Gotcha.
At KU, but um, so either way, that should be a fun one. Probably lots of points in that one, I would think. Yeah, I just think that one's a fun matchup to talk through and to kind of think about. Again, we'll talk about that maybe a little bit more on our preview pod. Other big results. Please tell me you at least saw the end of Louisville Stanford.
Oh my goodness. Oh, way to
Oh,
beat yourself, Louisville. Oh my word.
um,
It was a Miami moment. It was a Chris Ball moment. It was good heavens. Like the game's over and you get a personal foul and then you go off sides or what it is, and like Stanford doesn't have a chance. They haven't had a kick that far the entire season, and you keep putting them a little bit closer, and it's like, all right, well, 51.
5 yards here,
It'll be a
15
hard kick.
yards there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good heavens.
Yeah, I
I
didn't I
can't say
didn't
I'm not
see any of that
happy.
game. What?
I said I can't say I'm not happy. I root against Louisville all the time.
I just I didn't catch any of that game, but the ending. And speaking of like really good finishes, do you see the Clemson Pittsburgh? wrap on
Yeah, I
that
did see
game
that
too.
game. I
Yeah,
watched most of that game. Just
I had
you talking
more
about
eyes on
the
that one too. Yeah,
pick at the end.
just kind of a sort of a frenetic finish from only having what 24 points scored in the entirety of the first three quarters to then having 20 points scored in the last little bit, including a field goal with a minute and a half left to give Pitt the lead, and then all of a sudden, 3 plays later, Cade Klubnik's in the end zone for Clemson. Heartbreaking for Pitt. They've had some wars. Those two teams have gone back and forth a few different times, including at Clemson's peak. Like Pitt was a little bit of a thorn in their side there during those years, and
Yeah, did they have the win on their field?
yeah, they I think ended whatever that long home winning streak was for Clemson. So this one's another book in that I wouldn't call it a rivalry, but a series for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and tough for the Fighting Narduzzi's to not pull that one out. But Clemson's still sort of lurking in the background. Has needs some help to get into the ACC championship game, but if they get there, they've got a good team. They'd be a real challenge for either SMU or Miami. But if Miami trips up again, I think Clemson's in, right?
I don't know.
SMU would need to lose twice. They don't have a loss in conference yet. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah. So they need Miami to lose. So they're big Wake Forest fans and Syracuse fans over the next 2 weeks.
yeah,
I think they're going to have
not
to really
likely,
put their
but
eggs in on the basket of Syracuse. Yeah, I think Syracuse has a better chance than Wake does. Let's put it that way. I don't think either has
yeah.
a great chance, but
That's the one. That's the place that feels like the most settled out of like SEC, ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10. Like it's like the Big 10. It's like you think it's like probably going to be Oregon, Indiana, and Ohio State, or one
yeah,
of
it's
those
one
three.
of yeah.
And then the ACC is kind of saying like it's SMU and Miami most likely, and maybe Clemson. Yeah. So
Yeah, I feel like the Big 12 was close to being kind of in that group where it's like almost settled, but
if BYU had
then
won this
Kansas,
week,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Like then, I mean, mathematically, it still wouldn't have been over, but it'd have been pretty close. But then Kansas pulls off the shocker. I got some thoughts on that game. I don't know if you caught that game or
the BYU
watched it.
Kansas game.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's get
Sure,
into
go
it.
ahead.
Um, a couple things. Uh, Number one, the interception right before halftime was essentially the same play that they ran as the 2 point conversion against Utah last week. And
And it got picked off here too.
what did you see in the Utah game that said, okay, yeah, let's run it again? Like, I that one
Well,
was
it was a bad
baffling
throw
to me.
both times. If you throw it to the pylon, to the near pylon, it's a touchdown or a 2 point conversion. But you've thrown it to the back pylon, and like the
Well, not even
quarterback.
to the back pylon. He threw it back to the inside, like both times. Like I think that's the problem. Is like both of them are like way too inside. But here's my beef. Even more so than that, I believe is it the same person out on the route both times?
The receiver, you saying?
Yeah, I think it's both times. It's Taase or
I can't
however you
tell you
say
on
his
that.
name. Um, I venture to say it's probably Taase, just knowing the language, but I'm not positive of that. But he's your blocking tight end, and you're going to put him one on the outside and expect him to be the one to make a play. Like to me, it's not just the play call; it's the problem. It's the personnel. Like you have other guys that would have a better chance at doing that. You have three or four other guys I'd rather like any one of your receivers, Keanu Hill, who may have been injured at that point, so
No,
like maybe he's not a viable
he got hurt
option,
in
but
that
like
game. Yeah, I can't remember.
but but that's just you're not putting that player who is primarily a blocking threat. That's really what he does in a position to succeed, and it's just like yeah, kind of a disappointing play call. I know that people are frustrated with the offense. To me, it's that situation is really the only. That's not true. That's the one I'm most concerned with because you have a chance to go up and you get the ball right at half too. So it's like all right, hey, we can be a little more conservative on this, especially since you had timeouts. Like you could run the football a couple times. You had chances to kind of get them, or at least do some sort of play action, get the defense thinking, having to diagnose whether it's run or pass. And that one was not one where they had to do that. They were in shotgun, and he immediately flips his hips. So it's like it's not going to be a run. It's pretty obvious that it's not that. And it's just a one-on-one play. your tight end against a likely NFL defensive back. So I don't like it. Don't like the design of it. And then the next series where they take 13 minutes off the clock or 10 minutes off. I don't know how long it was. They just chewed up the entire third quarter.
Yeah, it's like 11
Uh,
minutes. The ball goes over to Kansas at the 4.5 minute mark.
yeah, okay. I with I think 7 minutes left in the third quarter, said to my wife, I think this is a problem. You have to get 7 out of this drive now. With how much time you're taking off the clock, you are shortening the game. You only get so many more possessions, and you definitely need a touchdown out of this one now that you've taken up 8 minutes of the clock. And then they proceeded to take off another 4 or 5. Um, and so, yeah, it's just really problematic in terms of just the scripting the game, understanding hey, we can probably pick up the pace a little bit more and give ourselves some room for error if this drive doesn't end in points or doesn't end in as many points as we want it to or need it to. So those are the two things that I felt like the game was not necessarily lost there, but opportunities to win the game were given up in the second and third quarters, and then you had to try and pull it out of the fire in the fourth, and you weren't able to do it.
Yeah, so my thoughts process, I kind of follow along the lines of you at the end. You got to get points there. You cannot turn the ball over. If you get 3 points there, this game has changed. I don't have as much of a problem as on that drive because you're at what 10-10. Kansas hasn't been proven that they've been able to consistently drive on you. I think they've yeah,
Touchdown their first possession, and then outside of that, nothing,
yeah,
right?
punt, field goal, which they did 11 plays on there, and then so I didn't have a problem with that. And the other thing that I thought about was your defense looked tired against Utah last week, and so I felt like this was their way of counterbalancing that a little bit. But it would have been ideal to get 7 out of that. But I don't have a problem with it. The biggest critical error is not getting 3 at least at the end of the second half or end of the first half, because you put yourself in a position to be super successful. You have a very unfortunate kick that lands on a player's head. You're the player that's aware can't recover that ball, and it ends up going to Kansas, and they score a touchdown off of it. That's very, very unfortunate. But even still, you're in a position to have a chance to win it. My other issue, and not as egregious, but definitely an issue, is when you get down to I think it's the 10-yard line, or I think it's the 6-yard line or something like that. You run 3 straight runs instead of mixing that up a little bit, and you set yourself up for which is 4th and 11 because if somebody does something stupid or something like that. It was just not good. So I'm looking at this. I'm like, all right, 1st and 10 on the 15. L.J. Martin run for 3 yards. 2nd and 7, Hinkley Rapati a 1-yard run, and that's where I think they oh yeah, I know. And then Hinkley Rapati a run for no gain, and I think that's the one where they kill, and they run it to the weak side or to the short side. I just don't like that. You got to give yourself a chance. You've been picking this team apart with your mixture of pass and run the entire time. Sometimes leaning more on the run, sometimes leaning on the pass, but you've got to stretch them in this. Got to make sure that they guard the first down, that they have to guard the touchdown. You have an opportunity to push them a little bit farther because a first down is at the 5-yard line. Great. Now you don't have to guard just 10 yards. Now you have to guard 15 because if you let this guy go a little bit farther behind you, you're going to have a touchdown. And you got to take advantage of that. And even still, the pass at the end at 4th and 11 where he hits Chase Roberts 4 yards short, 5 yards short. I don't understand why players throw that ball. Period. We've seen it happen you can go back to the Kevin Dyson game with its Steve
Oh,
McNair, or there are so many games where you see him, if it's thrown short, it ends short. The players keep it in front of them. There's a reason teams play cover 2, bend don't break, and you're not setting yourself up for success. If you run that exact same play though, first down, second down, you're in a position to have a run and have or a pass option. That's the only issue I have with The other thing is their scoring output has decreased significantly as the defense is not getting those critical turnovers that they've had. They do have 1 turnover in this game they're not able to capitalize on, but we watched this turnover luck that BYU had at the beginning of the year. We talked about it. Was it sustainable? It hasn't been sustainable, and these games have been a lot closer. And now they got beat.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say when you're talking about other it had so many shades of Coastal Carolina from the 2020. Do you remember that game?
I did not watch
Just
that game.
Oh, you didn't watch that game. That's right. I think we were babysitting and we watched it at your house, but you weren't there. Um, but yeah, like I mean, a very similar end where you're driving to potentially take the lead, but it is a situation where um, it's do or die, right? A field goal does you nothing. You need a touchdown wins you the game, but a field goal, you're just within so many points. So a field goal doesn't benefit you. So, and to come up short, yeah, a couple of yards shy of the goal line again, just felt like this very similar for our BYU fans that listen. That's probably a little bit triggering, but it kind of felt the same. Undefeated season comes to a close on a kind of the similar outcome of the play. Like I don't know about the play design. I wouldn't know that, but yeah, it was just kind of like as soon as it ended, that's kind of what I thought. I was like, that felt very much like very much like the Coastal Carolina game in 2020. So yeah, they got to regroup and they got a tough opponent, and it'll be a tough environment. I know a handful of people that will be at that game on both sides of the both sides of the game in terms of rooting interests. So I think you're fortunate if you're BYU that you're not getting a night game in the desert, but that will be a challenge to do that. That's an awesome game. Lots of stakes involved with that game. Both teams playing for their Big 12 championship hopes and potential playoff hopes on the line.
Yeah, and that game, if I'm not incorrect, like started off with Arizona favored -1 and swung all the way down to -3.5.
Yeah, lots of money coming in on Arizona State.
There are a lot of non-believers on BYU's side, and for good reason. BYU has
Yeah,
it
I was
looks
gonna
like
say.
trending, the opposite directions.
Yeah. The other thing is like, man, game management, like time clock management. Like this is me, like Kalani. If this ever gets to you, I will be that guy that's standing right next to you and says, "Call a timeout right now," or "Hey, we need to get our play calls in a little bit faster," or "Hey, we're snapping the ball with 3 seconds left out of a timeout or out of immediate timeout." Like, come on, let's operate at a higher clip. Like the operational standpoint on the offense is to me more frustrating than anything else. It just feels kind of clunky. So some of this becomes really easy. I think it was last week where I like advocated I could do this for Billy Napier. Like, hey, I can count and make sure there's only 11 people on the team or on the field during your special teams plays. And I can also ensure that we won't have two players with the same number on because we'll just not allow people to share numbers on offense and defense. Problem solved. Kalani, I'm telling you, I can help you with the timeouts. I can help you save some time. Like at the end there, they let a bunch of time roll off, and I suppose it didn't end up biting them in this game, but it's one of those things where as you look forward, like that's an area for improvement because those are unforced errors, right? It's really hard to win football games. It becomes harder when you make those kinds of mistakes that your opponent's not forcing you into doing that. That's just blunders that can be avoided. So
Yeah,
some frustration there, but again, a killer season for him. Like I'm not trying to take anything away from him. Just
I
there's
do lament like Retzloff missing some open, deep shots at the very beginning of this game. Um,
yes,
I think it's Lassiter
Lassiter, who's yeah 2 or 3 steps behind the
and there's
defensive
another other
back.
player that gets behind his gets. I think both of them get behind Dotson, which I mean he's a good cornerback. You got behind him,
Yeah,
and you just can't hit these players. They are two wide open deep balls, and I'm like, if you hit either one of those, this game changes. It opens up the floodgates. BYU fans can start to go crazy because I remember thinking at one point in time, like, this is a quiet crowd. Like, this is just like ho hum.
and that's what we said. We said last week. You have to give them a reason to get loud. Like it just isn't a naturally. I mean, maybe it's the lack of alcohol. I don't know, but like that, you have to kind of give them a reason to get into it. And you know, yeah, had some opportunities that were missed. Um, let's see what haven't we covered. Oh, LSU losing to Florida. Brian Kelly turning purple again.
Dude, I did not know who to root for in this game because I don't want Florida to win, but I also don't want Brian Kelly to win. I think I ended up rooting for Brian Kelly a little bit, but Kyrie goes, Dad, who do you want to win? I'm like, I want them both to lose. Like, I hate both of these teams. Uh, yeah, DJ Lagway, I mean, he only completes 50% of his passes, but there's some deep balls in there. I mean,
And
you
they were
only have to go through.
beauties. My goodness, that guy throws a beautiful deep ball.
Yeah, I was
I
like,
got
you
to
think
tell
a
you,
defense
Florida's kind of winning me
200
over. They're a fun team to watch. Like that, their running back, the Baugh, I can't remember his first name.
Jaden
Man, sorry, what?
Jaden Baugh.
Jaden Baugh, thank you. Yeah, he's fun to watch. They play hard. Like I like watching teams that just fight. Like, and to me, it's abundantly clear whether or not your team's full of fighters, and people that will just continue to keep chopping away no matter what the circumstance is. So I mean, Florida's got Ole Miss this week, but they got Florida State. Like they're going bowling. Like
Oh yeah.
they're gonna beat FSU. The question
Did
is by
you?
how much. Um,
When I think of Florida, I think of those cars that are like they go around the turn, right, or on the edge of a cliff, and all of a sudden they end up on two wheels, and they're kind of almost about to go over, and then they land, and they kind of just keep zooming off, and that's really what Florida's been like. People are on the verge of firing Napier, and his team and his coaching and his recruiting one has saved his job 100%. And I'm gonna tell. I think you probably believe this as well. This is a rocket that's about to explode. It was very very hairy whether you could get it all assembled and whatever else. But once it got all assembled and it is assembled, this thing's going to the moon. Like this Florida team will be a challenging team for national titles. They will be in the playoff race next year. This is a scary team that is going to about to just go.
it has shades of, to me, like, I mean, it's going to be hard to draw like perfect comparisons for this one, but like it's got shades of two things. Like so when Manny Diaz, right before he was fired at Miami, they went 7-5 and they won 5 of their last 6. And he said, "Look, the work is in. Now it's about to get really good." And I actually believed him. I kind of thought like, hey, if they're able to keep the coaching staff together and all of that, now they obviously none of that happened, right? They brought in a guy who's a totally different culture. It didn't work for the first couple of years, and so they had to do some retooling at Miami. But that quote to me stands out, like where I kind of think that Florida's at that same spot, and they've decided to keep Napier. Uh, and the other one that kind of reminds me of is like Dabo Swinney, where he was
Yeah,
really close to being fired at Clemson, and then they turned the corner. They gave him one more year. I think it was a 7-6 campaign the year prior, and they said, like, hey, we're going to keep Dabo Swinney for next year. He's our coach. But it was kind of clearly like, hey, we got to see some real results that next year, or we're done here. I think, yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm pretty bullish on what Florida's going to be, just given where the recruiting's at, given how hard that team plays for Billy Napier, and the schedule can't be as hard next year as it is this year. So I know it's similar, but I think if nothing else, you
yeah.
get a couple of those key games in the swamp as opposed to on the road.
You play at Miami. You play the Bulls again. USF. No, Miami played USF. So you play at Miami. You play USF. You play Florida A&M. Um, you have
I
Georgia,
got
Florida
3 wins
State.
so far. I don't think
Yeah,
I think Miami takes a step back next year unless they bring in some portal guys,
I agree with you.
specifically QB, but
Yeah,
a few others too. Keep going.
I don't know how you're going to get a quarterback though as good as Cam Ward is. Like
You won't.
that. Yeah,
Nah,
Georgia.
you're going
They
to be
play
worse.
Georgia, Florida State, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Texas, Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas A&M.
Right. Give me the home and roads, right? So Tennessee is at home, right? Florida State's at home.
Texas at home, Tennessee at home,
Texas at
Florida
home.
State at home, Mississippi State at home, Florida A&M home, and USF at home. At A&M, at Ole Miss, at LSU, at Kentucky.
Do LSU and A&M really scare you next year? Not A&M, sorry, Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss loses everything from this year. This was their all-in
Do you
year.
think Dart goes to the NFL?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. That's a good question, but I'm telling you, the defensive line's gone. Uh, I think,
I'd be scared of Texas. I'm scared of Tennessee.
but you
That's
get them at home. I feel okay about that. Like Tennessee's got some problems. We just talked about them offensively.
yeah. I'm getting. I don't think you think that they have more problems than I do. To be honest,
Okay, all right.
um, I think they've run into pretty good SEC defenses. and that's why they've only scored 28 points. But I mean, scoring 28 points isn't terrible. Um, I'm looking at that Georgia team. Like, I think Georgia can get better, which is scary to say. Um,
Yeah.
so you still end up like 3-4 losses, but you could. There's no also. I don't think there's any way that you like aren't playing in those games that you probably can win them too.
Yeah, you just gotta win one or two games you're not supposed to next year.
Yep. And
All right.
honestly, that Florida team's gonna be so good. I mean, who leads the Florida team this year? Like,
I don't think any of them leave for greener pastures, if that's what you're saying.
but I'm just saying, like, even to go to the NFL, like, I feel like most people are
Trying to
underclassmen.
think. Yeah, they
Huh?
mostly are. They mostly are. Shamar James, I think, is he a junior? Like, I could see him going
Yeah, I mean,
just to the league, just because he's that good.
he is a
But
junior.
and he's had some injury challenges, so it wouldn't stun me to see him just say, "Hey, I'm going to go get paid." But yeah, they've got a lot of really good young talent on that team. I think the state of Florida, to my detriment as a Florida State fan, but I think it is pretty interesting between Florida and Miami for the next few years. I kind of wish they had more games scheduled. I'm glad that they played this year and glad that they play next year, but would love to see what that looks like in like 2026 and 2027.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens if Mario Cristobal in the next 2 years can't get the job done because I can't see the team like being super happy about that. Like they want a championship so bad, but at the same time, like when do you fire somebody? I don't know. Like if you're gonna get constant 10-win seasons from Mario, when do you want to move on? I don't think Mario wants to move on to a better greener pasture. I think that's where he wants to be.
Oh yeah,
So like, do they just become a 10, 11 win season that get a team that gets to the playoffs most of the time, or gets close to the playoffs and never wins it? Because I don't see Mario Cristobal being a coach that wins a championship. No offense.
now that I mean, I think now that you have to win probably at least two games and maybe even three, I find it harder to believe that he will.
Yeah.
When it was just like, hey, it's the BCS or even like
Oh yeah.
the 4 team playoff, like far more likely that he gets two in a row right. But again, at the margins, I just don't,
Yeah.
I just don't trust him. But I don't know. That one's an interesting one. I'm just yeah, we can probably do some of this talk like maybe at the end of the season, but I think that yeah, Miami's got a good chance this year to make some noise, and what they do for an encore, I think is really fascinating to see what happens next year because most of their major contributors were 1 year rentals, and we'll
And
see
the
if the
defense is.
recruiting
Oh, go
has
ahead. Sorry.
backed that up. No, I'm just saying, and we'll see if the recruiting, which has been good, but we'll see if the younger players are ready to step in and fill those voids.
If I'm Mario, I make a change at defensive coordinator potentially because it's just been too porous. I kind of liked how Wisconsin did it this week. It's like, hey, Phil, we've given you 23 games. It's not working out, and like, don't make it before it hits rock bottom. But you can always make those steps improvement, and especially if you have a team that is got the defensive line talent that team has. You should not be getting scored on as much as you are. Like that's the one thing I could see next year. If scary is if they don't have a quarterback that can fix that situation, and they don't have a change of defensive coordinators. I mean, think about how many games they played on the edge this year. They could run
Yeah,
5, and they could be right back to a 7-5 team.
no argument there. I think you're right. Like if you just say, hey, we're going to score 1 touchdown less per game, which seems realistic given that you're going to lose Cam Ward, and you're going to give up a little bit more, maybe
Yeah.
that's there's potential for that for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyways, this isn't the future
yeah,
of Florida
yeah,
football.
yeah. The state of Florida. That's what we do. We tangents. If you're not here for it, I mean that's how we've always been. Um, I got eyes on Missouri, South Carolina. Um, just frenetic. I don't know what it is about Missouri and the late game, just wildness that comes out, but just the number of lead changes in this one in the last 7 minutes was pretty entertaining. And of course, they had kind of the crazy finish against Oklahoma last week. Yeah, so the lead changes in this one. Missouri takes. Sorry, Missouri takes the lead with 9 minutes left. South Carolina answers with a touchdown 4 minutes later at 5 minutes and 4 seconds left in the game. Missouri scores a touchdown with a minute 10 seconds left, and then Raheem Sanders for South Carolina runs in the game-winning touchdown. 15 seconds left to go in the game. Like just a wild, crazy finish. Missouri, I think, brought more than we thought they would. Like I think we both kind of said. I don't think either of us picked this game, but we both said like we think South Carolina is going to cover that spread of 11 and a half. And they, again, needed the last minute to kind of come back and win that game. But they were up in the second quarter. They were up 21-6, and it didn't look like Missouri really had any life. So hat tip to them for kind of finding something in the second half and almost like exclusive, like not even most of the third quarter. They scored a touchdown with about 5 minutes left in the third quarter to really actually get their like uh, get the scoring kind of going. I know they had two early field goals, but I just Missouri is kind of being finally being exposed for what we've said for what we thought for a while. It's like all right, they're an okay team, right? Um, but yeah, South Carolina 7-3, 5-3 in conference. I just I'm pretty bullish on what they can be. They've got a lot of young talent. We talked about this a few weeks ago, but
Mm-hmm.
Shane Beamer has got things rolling there. He's got some really good pieces from the defensive line. Lenore Sellers is a good young quarterback, big physical guy. I there's reasons to be really, really excited if you're in Columbia, and I specify Columbia, South Carolina, not Columbia, Missouri. Um, but yeah, did you have any thoughts on that one? I just kind of wanted to quickly mention that.
No, I agree
Awesome.
with you that South Carolina is going to be an interesting game, but or interesting team going forward. But the other thing is the SEC has a lot more buyers than any other conference, and people that are willing to pay the money to bring in the athletes. I mean, the Big Ten has some, but the SEC has more, in my opinion. So
Yeah, and that's where I guess your job is as the head coach is just to remind people of the grass isn't always greener, and try and come up with those examples where it's like, hey, remember when this guy transferred thinking he was gonna move up and upgrade a situation and it didn't work out. Find as many of those as you can and share them with all your team. Uh, but yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. That's one that if I'm one of those, apex predators in the SEC, like I'm looking real long and hard at that roster and seeing who do we know, who could we reach out to.
oh yeah.
Do you have anything else for this one? I don't know if we wanted to.
Just last but not least, Colorado really is the cream of the crop in that Big 12 team. Like in that Big 12, they look like they're just playing so well. I know you touched on it, but like I watched that game and it was close-ish at first, and then Colorado just kind of put their stamp on it. And
Yeah,
I kind of have come to expect that of the Colorado teams. So kind of expect the same thing against Utah or against Kansas this next week too. So
yeah, and the funny thing is, like, even now that they're doing well, like, I feel like they're doing it with such little fanfare relative to like the hype that happened at the beginning of last season, where it was like, oh, they pulled out a game against Colorado State, and everyone's talking about it. And now it's like, no, they're legitimately beating really good teams, and I feel like they're not being talked about enough. Like
people will talk about them when they get to the playoffs,
they
and they
will,
get the first game.
and
First
and
game.
I feel like they're going to, which is
Yeah.
wild to say. Like, I mean, I don't, I wouldn't have considered us haters. I think we were people that said like, hey, look, they're ahead of schedule last year. Like that team that he inherited was bad, was really bad, and to get them to win 4 games last year was excellent.
I,
Um,
I put myself in the book. I was a hater. I didn't think Dion was capable of organizing a team to be good, this good, and that like you can get good players, but you also have to get good coaches and get good organizations to be successful. And I wasn't sure he could do that, and he's proven 100%, foot in my mouth that he has and he can. And kudos to him. He made a hard call last year in firing the OC and bringing in.
yeah, that one I was very much lambasted by lots of people in the moment, and
It was a great
now
call.
in the rear view, I think everyone wins there, right? Like now he's a head coach at San Diego State, so like good for Sean Lewis, but
Yeah,
also like man, like what they've done on offense is hard to I mean, hard to argue against. They've been great. They've upgraded that offensive line. I mean, I feel like even from last year, like Shedeur Sanders is way better.
Playing in an NFL offense to some degree too, which is kind of interesting because it's setting him up to be successful next year too.
Yeah, yeah. And they've always had the athletes on the outside. I feel like they've done a better job of balancing that with a respectable run game. And then the defensive improvements also been pretty noteworthy as well. So, yeah, I tip my cap to them. I think I questioned. I think the thing that I questioned was like how long term is it built for, and that I think still remains to be seen. But I mean, the year-over-year improvements undeniable, and going from was it a 1-11 team that he took over, or 2-10,
Yeah, something like that.
and yeah, and they're able to now be in the conversation for a Big 12 championship and for a playoff berth. I don't know how deep of a run they could make. Frankly, I have some reservations on that, but that's a heck of a turnaround. So good on them. Um, I don't know if I have anything else for this one. We can wrap it,
Just
or
wrap it.
all right. Well, we'll keep it to a cool 46 minutes and change. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And yeah, we'll see you on our next one. And thanks for joining us on the CFB Paint podcast. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate it as always. We'll see you next time.